Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation. Again, I want to thank Secretary Stefan Pryor from the Rhode Island Commerce for being my partner and co-host in this conversation that we're having in regards to housing. Housing is an important topic. We have been seeing every day the consequences of the lack of housing that we have right now in the state of Rhode Island. And we have going to be having a series of conversations centered around housing. Each of these conversations going to have a specific topic related to housing. It could be the homelessness, which is the topic that we're going to be talking about today, affordable housing, workforce and housing, the lack of a housing stock available for all levels of housing. And those discussions is going to lead to an in-person summit that we were going to have coming up in the fall. We will bring stakeholders together and community members and also advocates and experts to share their knowledge and best practices and to guide us in helping us find a solution for this problem. With that, today I believe that the topics that we have is one of the most pressing issues that we have to face. It is hard to talk about housing and don't talk about the homeless community and the challenges that they're going through right now. This past year with the pandemic, we were able to see even more relevant how important to have a safe place to call home is. That's connected to your health. In order to be healthy, you needed to have a place to call home where you can be in isolation to make sure you were not getting ill with the illness, but also if you got ill and you needed to recuperate yourself and get better, you needed to have a home, a place where you can go to every night. So the rising numbers of individuals impacted by the homeless is an issue that we have to address. And I think that in Rhode Island, if we all work together, we can get to what is called functional zero. And some individuals have been asking what is functional zero. Functional zero is the idea that at any point in time, the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in our community would not be greater than the production of monthly production of housing available to replace it in our community. So it's difficult to say that we're going to get to the point in which homelessness is eliminated completely. Ideally, that's where we want to go. But to be more practical, we want to get to the point in which, at the point when anyone becomes homeless, there's going to be already a system in place, and we're going to have enough creation of new housing units that this person or family that become homeless, it would be just, it's going to be something that's going to be addressed right away. Currently in Rhode Island, the homeless population is roughly 1,300 individuals. When you think about this, it's about 1,300 individuals every day living outside in our communities or sleeping in their cars if they're fortunate enough to have a vehicle, or maybe sleeping in the doorway of a business or under a bridge. So this is a serious problem that we need to address. I would like now to bring my co-host for this conversation, Secretary Pryor, to give us an introduction about the work that Rhode Island Commerce is doing to address the housing problems in general, but also more specific about what we're doing with the homeless community. Secretary.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Very pleased to be with you, and thank you for creating this forum. I know this was a major priority for you, very justifiably, and you've already brought it to light and made it happen. Pleased to be joining with you in this effort. Lieutenant Governor, as you express, and as Governor McKee has directed us to prioritize, housing is a real crisis across Rhode Island. It's a crisis across income levels. There are challenges for nearly everyone seeking housing in this market. And all of those problems converge and create the problem of homelessness or exacerbate it. So people with the fewest resources end up suffering, and you're right to start there. I'm going to lay out the bigger picture as you've guided us to do, Lieutenant Governor, and talk about where we are, and look forward to the in-depth conversation around homelessness today and future subtopics going forward. But we know that the affordability challenges that I'm about to describe exacerbate other problems in our community, whether it be behavioral health challenges, mental illness, addiction, domestic violence, other traumas and struggles and crises that people are facing. So this is a topic that intersects with so many others. Let me talk about housing, though, to kick us off. The challenges in our housing market are many. The National Association of Realtors ranks Rhode Island the third least affordable state in the country. We're behind California and New York, but we're worse even than Massachusetts. The median sale price for a single family home in Rhode Island last month was up almost 25% versus June of 2020. That's a dramatic jump. And it's true for multifamily home sales also, almost a 22% increase over the previous year, June to June. These trends are making the whole market tough to navigate and tough to access for Rhode Islanders, and again, affecting those among us with the least resources, folks who are homeless at the end of the day. A balanced home ownership market has 5 to 6 months of inventory. Rhode Island has under 2 months of supply of homes for sale right now. So you get the idea. This is not a healthy market. And the challenges are being faced by Rhode Islanders up and down the income gradient. There is a lot that is going on to help remedy these various problems in the housing market and as pertains to homelessness, and I'm going to review a few of them. We recently, as a state, passed an affordable housing bond, a $65 million bond. We're very grateful to the electorate for that. That will enable us through the Building Homes Rhode Island program to create new housing stock that's affordable, and that will help Rhode Islanders with high need. We just, in this past legislative session, last month, concluded the process of creating the first ever dedicated funding stream for housing. We should certainly applaud the General Assembly for taking up the governor and your leadership, Lieutenant Governor, to create this new measure. We're pleased that there will finally be a continuing revenue stream drawing from the realty transfer tax and increment thereof. And we're very grateful to Senator Kallman and Representative Speakman for helping to lead the way. We're going to hear from these two excellent members of the General Assembly later, and to leadership in general in the General Assembly. Of course, it's still a relatively modest stream, and it's a complement to the bond, and there's more to be done. But the main thing we need to do is thank General Assembly leadership for taking up the measure and getting it done at long last at the request of our administration. Also, there was legislation to ban source of income discrimination, which is such an ugly practice. And we're so grateful that the Fair Housing Practices Act now prohibits housing discrimination against renters based on their source of income, whatever it may be, including government sources of income.
Correct.
Also at long last, we have placed into the toolbox a brand new program specifically aimed at homelessness to build upon the many funding sources and programs aimed at helping homeless individuals among us here in Rhode Island. There's a 5-year pilot program called Pay for Success that aims to proactively support participants to improve the services they receive, prevent crises, reduce the use of emergency medical services. It's a $6 million program over 5 years. That's a public-private partnership that uses a very innovative practice called social impact bonds that have been used in other states, and we're finally going to put into use here, and thank goodness for our homeless community to start, and a very important new activity. And Lieutenant Governor, as an overarching governance structure, we have added an element, which is to say that we will now have a housing coordinator, some will say a housing czar or czarina, in a new Deputy Secretary of Commerce for housing, a person who will have authority within the government to work across disciplines well beyond commerce, to health and human services, to the various support services necessary to work with some of the providers that are right on this line today, part of this show today, Lieutenant Governor, and beyond, to help coordinate so that we can use the new resources that are being brought to bear, but also plan for the possibility of new resources and to tap the American Rescue Plan and other yet to come federal dollars. One of the things that Governor McKee has done is that he has organized us around envisioning a Rhode Island 2030, a Rhode Island in the next decade and beyond, that improves upon the conditions that we currently have here in Rhode Island as we emerge from COVID, enables us to make near-term investments to boost Rhode Island in that near term, but also to invest for the longer term in areas where we know we have need and where we know we have potential. One of the areas that certainly merits investment is housing. We've been doing a series of public conversations, community conversations on these critical subjects, inclusive of, in one very important instance, housing. And housing and homelessness is going to feature in any version of a plan that we produce. And I'm sure that the General Assembly sees fit to ultimately pass to use federal dollars. So this is yet another very, very crucial contributing conversation to that dialogue around Rhode Island today and Rhode Island 2030. Let me just conclude with this point. We're going to hear a bunch of statistics today. We're very grateful to those analysts and articulators of these stats on housing and on homelessness. I want to end with these statistics in particular. These are from our coordinated entry system, where we track individuals who are entering service provision pertaining to homelessness and those who are not yet able to enter. And I want to note that earlier this month, just this month of July, Lieutenant Governor, there were still 141 adults, 34 families with children, and 24 adult families who can't get into shelters, who cannot find the services that they need, beginning with shelter, and are living on the street, or, as you point out, if they're so fortunate as to have a car. That's many too many in a state of our size. We can solve these problems if we continue to rally the resources, if we build upon the initiative of the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the General Assembly. We're very grateful for this forum today. And now back to you, my co-host, our guiding leader, the lieutenant governor.
Thank you so much, Secretary. And I'm grateful to you and Governor McKee for Governor McKee has making housing a priority, and he has been very supportive also since I was selected to be the lieutenant governor. I have been very vocal about my interest in addressing housing, and I want to thank the governor for his support, and I want to thank you for everything that you and your team are doing to make sure that housing is a priority. I'm going to take a moment. I'm just going to say that message in Spanish, and then I'll come back. Aunque esta conversación no se está traduciendo al español simultáneamente ahora mismo, por favor, si usted tiene alguna pregunta en referente a los problemas de viviendas y de casas, o de alguien que está desamparado, por favor, escriba esas preguntas en el chat de Facebook, y nosotros haremos lo posible para contestar sus preguntas según se vayan presentando. Por favor, si tiene cualquier pregunta, siéntase en la libertad de escribirla en español y mi equipo le va a contestar. So I just was making a disclaimer that even though we're not able to have this conversation translated live into Spanish, individuals that would like to ask question in Spanish, they can type the question in the chat, and the team from my office is going to be checking the chat, and it's going to be answering the questions the best as we can right now, or we will get back to you with the answer if we don't have it. Okay. So it's very important for us to understand the challenges that the individuals that are facing homelessness have been going through, and to hear directly from them. So right now, I would like to ask Ben to help us. I'm gonna introduce the panelists that from the individuals that have been dealing with homelessness. And after we hear from them, we're gonna go to our legislators. I wanna thank again Representative Speakman and Senator Kallman for joining us today, because we want to hear from them about the work that the General Assembly has been doing and the things that they're planning on doing for the next legislative session. Okay, so I want to introduce Roger Goddard, Wendy Thomas, and Kayla Sims. They're going to give us, we're going to hear from them about the challenges that they have been experiencing when it comes up with dealing with homelessness and trying to find resources. With that, I'm just going to pass it over to Ben. Ben?
Went out of my house and with a fire. I lost everything, and I got a little bit of help for a couple of days. After that, I was basically on my own. I'm a senior citizen. I'm so disabled, and the road that I've traveled to obtain homeless, to obtain a house, shelter, has been very, very difficult. I have found a lot of encouragement verbally. People, they want to help you, and I've received a lot of emotional support, but the process of filling out applications and the wait list, I filled out probably 12 different applications in different facilities, but the wait list is like very, very long, and that's the biggest obstacle that I have encountered. I don't know what can be done about that. I guess there are a lot of people that are in need. So there really isn't that much, I guess, that you can do to speed up the situation. But I'm still struggling. I'm still struggling to obtain home housing. One of the places that I applied to was 10 years ago, and my name is still on the waiting list. And that's been my struggle. I don't know how to overcome that. I don't have any positive suggestions for anybody else that can overcome it. But the main problem that I've encountered is that extensive wait list for to receive housing, and there are many people out here that need housing, and they are still out here waiting. I don't know what can be done about that, but that problem has to be addressed. That's all I can say at this point. That's been my problem. I'm still struggling with it, and I honestly don't know. I don't know any other way. I haven't had any suggestions, any support, other than emotional encouragement at this point. Like I say, I'm still struggling. So that's basically my story at this point. And the only suggestions that I have is, again, if somehow there can be more housing, more financial support for housing, that's an issue that has to be addressed. And how and when that will happen is, I don't know, but it needs to be it needs to happen. The people have to be, I guess the public has to be more aware of the wait list, the list, and the time that people have to wait and be homeless. They're still on the streets, and they have to make do the best they can. I know what it is to sleep in doorways. I know what it is to be out there on the street. I know what it is to be homeless and sleeping in the rain and in the snow and in the cold. I've experienced that, and it's just something that it's that. I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. Like I say, I'm still experiencing my situation, and I just hope that the public can be more aware of the possibilities of that may be presented in the future for the people that are homeless.
I am Wendy Thomas. I've been homeless several times. The first time was back in October, well, quite a few years ago. And we had a fire. We were down at my mother's helping out. My kids wanted to go to the YMCA down there for a Halloween overnight. I let them. We spent the night down there. I get a call on Saturday morning saying your house is on fire. I could hear the fire trucks and everything in the background. Finally made arrangements for someone to pick the kids up and get them back to my mom's house. I ended up getting a ride back to Providence. The Red Cross put us in a hotel for 3 days because it was on a weekend. Gave us food for a weekend. Got in contact with Crossroads. At that time was Travelers Aid. We finally got into a domestic violence shelter only for the fact that that's where there was room, and that we wanted to keep my kids in the same school district. I took a week out of work, talked to the school, talked to the daycare, the whole 9 yards, went back to work. The day I went back to work, one of my neighbors was talking to me, and one of the other neighbors was looking for me. She had an apartment available. All I had to do was come up with first month rent and deposit. Unfortunately, it was right next door to the old house, so it was tough. So a couple of years later, we moved out to Central Falls because the lady that ended up giving me a ride to my job lived out there, and we were like close, and she gave me a ride all the time, and there was an apartment available out there. We're talking almost 5 years after the first fire. We wake up in the middle of the night in May. Now, not only are my kids older, I also had 2 grandkids in the house. The youngest was 8 months. The older one was 9 months old. A baluster blew in the basement and hit the fuse box. So this time it was even more difficult. At least I had a clue on what I needed to do. The problem was with the kids being older and having children of their own. I got in contact with Crossroads again, which I believe was still Travelers Aid at that point. My youngest daughter ended up going to the women's shelter with the family shelter, I'm sorry. And then my oldest daughter had already been to college in Connecticut, so she ended up going out there and staying with some of her friends. My son ended up staying with some of his friends' parents because of the fact that he was 17. They wanted him in a men's shelter, and a men's shelter isn't appropriate for a man, never mind a 17-year-old boy. And our house used to be the house where all the kids hung out and everything. So they took him in for a while, and then he went down to my sister's house. We've been through a lot. This time, cell phones were still by the minute. We couldn't keep in contact with each other all month long. It kind of broke the family up. I still hear from my youngest daughter now and my son at times. I've been on the centralized wait list since 2017. I've also filled out my application for the Move It Up voucher because I'm in permanent supportive housing now. And I just take one day at a time and do what I need to do. But I think if they move people quicker through the permanent supportive housing, then they could get more people that are homeless into places and get us into other places. But we need housing. We need housing. Thank you.
Moving to Rhode Island as a 26-year-old single mother of two, I came here to escape a very unhealthy relationship. When I arrived here, I knew that I was in for a challenge and a struggle, but I didn't know exactly how hard it would be. I came here, I was endorsed by my hospital from California. I started working at Rhode Island Hospital, and things slowly started to take a different turn. I was living in a place in Reservoir Triangle, and I didn't know how hard the housing situation was here. So when I got a slumlord, I didn't think that it would be that big of an issue to give up my residence and have such a hard time finding another residence. About 3 months into searching, I started to become overwhelmed. I started to become discouraged. I had a good job. I moved here with a personal nanny. I took on the responsibility of having that nanny and their child. But then I came to the point where there was no housing. There were no resources. I reached out to the Department of Human Services. I reached out to Crossroads. I reached out to Sojourner House, which thankfully I met a young lady by the name of Amanda Bruno, who is the housing coordinator there, and was able to link me to multiple people that could possibly help me. I was chosen off of the Section 8 waiting list, I want to say 3 times as of date. And all 3 times I was denied because I was considered to be over income. Now, what does that mean? It means that on the criteria 5 that they use when scaling and beginning to work with different people, you have to meet a certain income qualification, you have to meet certain standards, and I just happened to score above all of the standards that they were looking for. So now I'm paying almost $280 every 3 days for a hotel room for me and my 2 children, as well as my nanny and her son, who eventually ended up leaving. Fast forward now to 2020, I've obtained my own housing by myself, and I was able to maneuver the system to basically fit my needs. I was able to meet different people and network, and with my current role that I have now as an advocate for people facing homelessness, or for the homeless population that is in recovery or that have open cases with DCYF or whatever it may be, I've learned that a lot of the programs and the allocated funds that they have for them are not accessible for the normal Rhode Islander. I didn't really know how to approach it, so I started looking at different agencies and different boards and things that I can get on, and, you know, blessed and highly favored, as I may say myself, through my agency, I was actually able to acquire the proper people in my corner to back me. So now I sit on the board of the Homeless Coalition. I also sit on the Voices of Homelessness Commission. And we basically are here to get answers and find out how can we as a state come together to help this population that otherwise goes without a voice, that otherwise goes without being seen or heard. Yeah, we see them sitting on the street, or we see them, you know, walking around, or we see people in the shelters, and we know how highly impacted that the 31 shelters that we have here are, but out of those 31, 10 are only for recovery. And you have to have used within the last 30 days, and you have to have all these different qualifications. So to someone that's in recovery, it could be that one thing that sets them back into using. For that mom that's struggling and feels like she's alone, it could be that one thing that makes her feel like her kids are better off in state custody. For those people that are sitting here and they feel like they have no voice, what are we doing to change? Because what does homelessness look like? Looking at me, a lot of people wouldn't believe that I went through that situation myself. You know, a lot of the families that we deal with now have this same issue, the barrier for reunification, housing. So call CES, Coordinated Entry System, for those who don't know. That's how you get the funds allotted, but you have to stay in a shelter. But I don't want to stay in this shelter. There's multiple shelters that are not safe. There's multiple people inside of these shelters that don't have to undergo background checks and stuff like that. But then the housing that they do have available is not accommodatable. It's not something that you can put yourself into and just be comfortable there. So where do we meet these people at? And that's why I'm here today. I want to know, and I want my voice to be heard, and I want the platform that I've been given to be able to use my voice for those people who feel like they don't have one.
Wow, Secretary, tough statements.
Truly.
I want to thank Roger, Wendy, and Kayla. I want to thank you for taking part in this conversation and sharing your personal story and for what you're doing to make sure that we can address this problem and others don't go through this challenge. Secretary?
Yes, it's an incredibly important thing to be grounded in your experiences and to know what you've been through. Frankly, in government, we do have contact with people who are homeless and people who are struggling in our community. It's important for, I think, not only us in government to continuously start with these very real stories and experiences, but also to make sure the public understands that our neighbors are becoming homeless. Newly arrived, valued residents are becoming homeless. People who are hardworking their whole lives are becoming homeless. People who are facing unfortunate circumstances are becoming homeless. The homeless are us, and we need to make sure that we provide the services necessary to protect our neighbors, to protect our own families if ever these circumstances were to arrive upon us. So thank you so much. It was incredibly powerful.
Thank you, Secretary. Next, I would like to, I think it's very important for us to hear from our state elected officials that have been working really hard to address these issues of homelessness and housing issues in general here in the state of Rhode Island. I would like to bring two dynamic leaders who have been doing a lot of work at the State House in this past legislative session. There were a lot of success in the area of housing. I want to bring Representative John Speakman and Senator Meghan Kallman to join us in this conversation. I would like to hear an update from them about the work that they have been doing. And after, we're going to go back to hear some suggestions from our panelists, and we're going to hear from the experts in the housing field that we have as a panel with us. And then we're going to come back again to the rep and the senator so we can talk to everyone with just one conversation. So I just want to introduce Representative Speakman. She's the second vice chair of the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee, and a member of the House Environmental and National Resources Committee, House Health and Human Services Committee, and the House Oversight Committee. She was first elected to the House of Representatives in March 2019 and has long been interested in the housing policies. She's a member of the advisory board of Housing Work RI and has also served as the State Housing Appeal Board from 2010 to 2016. Senator Kallman is the Vice Chairwoman of the Senate Committee on Housing and Municipal Government, Secretary of the Senate Committee on Rules, Government Ethics and Oversight, a member of the Senate Committee on Commerce and Senate Committee on Environmental Agriculture. She was first elected in 2020 and is a member of the State Housing Appeal Board and is also an advocate in the Senate on housing issues and has long been a community organizer. Welcome both to this conversation. And I would like to I'm very excited to hear from both of you. And we're going to start hearing from Representative Speakman. She can give us an overview of the work she's been doing. Representative.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor. And I'm happy to join my colleague in the Senate. We work together on these issues. Secretary Pryor sort of stole our thunder when he talked about a lot of the legislative initiatives that we accomplished this year. So thank you for that introduction. One of the things that, well, there are two things that give me hope from my side of the State House, several things that give me hope. One is that we changed the name of the Committee on Municipal Governance to the Committee on Municipal Government and Housing, indicating that's one of the priorities of our chamber. And the Speaker, Speaker Shikarchi, has also mentioned housing as often as he possibly can, indicating to me that's a priority of leadership. And that is very heartening because that is not something that we have heard in recent years. That priority was reflected in the legislation that we and the Senate worked on this year. And two that I wanted to highlight, and Senator Kallman will talk about a couple of others, are, as Secretary Pryor noted, he will be joined by a Deputy Secretary of Commerce for Housing. That's essential. One of the things that we heard from the three very compelling testimonials that preceded us were that housing is a complex problem, that people become homeless for all kinds of different reasons and need all kinds of different solutions. So we need in the state someone who can spend their full-time job looking at the complex problems of housing. And again, up and down the market across all income levels and all kinds of communities. So I am very grateful that appeared in the budget, and look forward to someone whose sole job is to look at housing policy in the state. And then Secretary Pryor also mentioned the Pay for Success program, which was sponsored in the House by Representative Kassar. That is an innovative solution, we hope, to homelessness, and I look forward to its implementation in the state. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Kallman.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, Rep. Speakman, and Secretary Pryor. I'm sorry, I have kind of a cold, so I'm going to do my best to communicate while not sounding like I'm gargling. But as the representative said, it was a big year for housing in the General Assembly. So we have a couple of big successes to celebrate. The first one, Secretary Pryor did mention this, but we established for the very first time a dedicated stream of funding for affordable housing. I saw a question come through the chat about there's no line in the state budget for affordable housing. That was true until this year, and now it is not true anymore. I'm very pleased to say. Also, because of some of the federal stimulus money, we were able to seed that fund with a pretty good chunk of change to start. And the fund is important because it enables us to plan over the long term for building affordable housing in a way that is quick and meets the needs of the community. This is accomplished by adding a small tax onto high-end real estate transactions. So sales of real estate that are over $800,000 have a small tax added onto them. The tax goes into this pot of money. That pot of money is then used to plan and build affordable housing. So that was a really big deal, and that was one of the sort of big gaps that was missing from our state housing plan. The other big two sort of parallel bills that also really mean a lot were anti-discrimination bills in housing. So again, until this year, it was legal to discriminate against potential renters based on what's called their source of income. Typically, this means housing choice vouchers, but also veterans benefits, alimony, that kind of thing. So if a landlord didn't like that you had a housing choice voucher with what was frequently called Section 8, they could refuse to rent to you. That is no longer true. Landlords could also refuse to rent to you if you were a member of the LGBTQ plus community. That is also no longer allowed. So these are big steps in the anti-discrimination in the housing landscape. So we're really proud to have worked together on that. There's a lot to be done, but we have a framework now to pick up the pace, and especially given sort of what's coming down the pike with both the federal climate and also the state climate. I'm really optimistic that we can be moving at a much better clip.
Marvelous. Well, Representative and Senator, thank you so much for your leadership on this. It's really an enormous step forward. So we really applaud you for it. And I have to say, Speaker Shekarchi and President Ruggiero have been exemplary in their insistence that we all focus. And you've more than taken up the mantle. You've presented the ideas, you've run them through, you've gotten them passed. But the Speaker and Senate President have been truly exemplary in bringing this agenda forward. So thank you.
That is correct. Thank you, Secretary, for bringing that up. I have to once again thank the leadership of the Speaker Shekarchi and the Senate President Ruggiero and the governor who signed those bills into law for taking leadership this year and making sure that we are addressing the housing crisis that we're facing right now. Thanks. Next, I know we all want to hear from the individuals that are at the forefront working in this homelessness issue, but we want to hear from, again, we asked Roger, Wendy, and Kayla for ideas and suggestions. So we're gonna play another video. And I want to thank the Providence Public Library who allows us to do the recording of these videos there with them. So I'm going to switch over to Ben again. Ben? How did you find resources to help with your situation? Was it difficult to get the information you needed?
It was very difficult to get the information that I needed, and it is still been difficult. The difficulties still exist. Basically the only way that I found resources were to speak with other people that were homeless. I went to some of the agencies. They gave what information they could, I was basically on my own to gather everything together. But again, I would say that the bulk of the information that I got to addressing resources was from other people that have been homeless.
It's a lot of hard work, finding social workers and stuff that actually have the available time to work with you, because there's so many people that they need to serve at this point.
I actually didn't. So before I moved here, 8 months before I moved here, I applied for the centralized wait list, which helps you apply, for those who don't know, to all of the open wait lists in the state of Rhode Island. And I didn't actually get any resource help. I made too much to get help from the Department of Health. I didn't qualify, even as a single mother, for majority of the programs in Rhode Island that help the homeless or those facing homelessness. And the houses that were available, I didn't qualify for because I didn't make 3 times the rent amount.
What obstacles did you encounter while trying to access services? Were eligibility requirements an issue?
The obstacles basically that I ever encountered was waiting list, to get homeless, to get housing. Once you're homeless, the waiting lists are tremendously long. I guess because there are a lot of people that are homeless, and there only is a limited resources, financial and availability housing. So what I've really encountered there, the difficulty that I encountered is the waiting, the time. It's a time element that I've experienced.
I've been on the centralized wait list since 2017. I'm now in a building that is not quite appropriate for me. I think that we should work on maybe a step-up program to move ahead people that they find don't need the supportive housing so that other people can get into.
Eligibility requirements definitely were an issue. So the obstacles that I faced is I hold a degree. I have my AA in psychology. I also challenged the board after my 3rd year as a CNA for my LVN. So I had that under my belt. I also came here working as a licensed certified nursing assistant. And I think the biggest obstacle was the fact that I had the education, but I didn't make enough. I didn't make enough to live in the houses because I didn't make that triple times the rent or whatever they asked. And then I didn't qualify for the aid that's available to the state and allot it to separate programs for someone like me seeking refuge in the state of Rhode Island.
What resources or protections could have prevented your experience with homelessness?
I think there needs to be more attention addressing people that have situations such as fires when they're burnt out, the domestic people, domestic situations. There need to be more financial and more social support and concern on those particular areas in our communities.
I don't know that there are any, unless there was available apartment right away, because nothing's going to stop a fire. Nothing's going to stop health issues.
I believe that the resources that possibly could have helped was manpower. I believe the people are there, but the money's not. So, and it's the exact opposite when you think about it, because the money's there and the people aren't. You have so many people in these positions, but for that, as my husband would say now, for those 10 people that work hard, you have 50 people that make 60, and those 10 people do the work of those 50 that barely do. And it's not to shoot shots at anyone. I know everyone has, things that happen in life that interfere with your work life. But I feel like if you put your best foot forward and you have these people who see and understand and have the passion to help, those resources would be a lot more readily available. You would be able to accommodate, so to speak, each of these general populations, because you have the recovery portion, you have the user portion, those who are still heavily involved with whatever substance or mental health that they may have. And then you have women, children, and families. You have single fathers, you have single mothers, you have mother and fathers who just had a rough time. So I honestly believe that more needs to be done to address that.
How would you improve existing services?
I would seek more additional people, more help to the public agencies, and I would suggest a task force to look at what's available and what needs to be more available to the people that are in the difficulty situations?
More housing, more money for housing.
For single families, I can only speak for myself and those I advocate for. And I think for families, for single parent families, the best way that we can help them is like coming up with a program or something that California, for example, because I can only speak of what I know. California has a resource program that gives you 7 days in a hotel, depending on your circumstances and how severe. A mother like myself, if I were to go back home with 2 children, I would get those 7 days. Every day I would have a housing coordinator assigned to me, where every day we would spend those certain amount of hours researching and like really hitting the ground, trying to figure out what places are available and narrowing it down. And then they work with you alongside of our senators and, you know, the different organizations and those people that are in places of power to be able to get you into something, because you have the income, you have the education. And even if you don't, just they're able to put you in the direction to be able to be self-sustaining thereafter.
You had the opportunity to sit down with decision makers and lawmakers. What would you want them to know about your experience?
I would want them to know that the time that people have to struggle without without the support that could be offered to them is the most difficult period in their situation. That has to be addressed. Somehow more attention has to be put on. More people have to look at what's going on and extend the task force.
It's terrible. I mean, it's not an easy situation. You've got to be a tough person to deal with it. It's a very tough situation. People just don't understand that, how hard it is. They think these people they see sitting and panhandling or whatever during the day. But there's another section of us that are working hard every day to try to find a new place to live.
I would want the lawmakers and the decision makers to know that coming here for refuge based off of what I read, no family, no friends, no tie to the state of Rhode Island, smallest little state that I could think of to get away from something that was so traumatizing and so hurt. I came here looking for safety, and I came here under the impression that, like they say, New York is where dreams are made of. Rhode Island was supposed to be where my dream was made of. And this is a part of it, being able to speak and have my voice heard, but at the same time, it was not supposed to be in this way. I would want them to step back from their positions and look at it if it was their brother or their sister or their mother or someone close to them dealing with this, and how they would reach out to that one person. Rhode Island's very small. I learned very fast. If you know Tom, he knows Dick, Harry, and Jane. So why not use those powers for the better and be able to link these people who we all can vouch for that need that one up and that extra step and push.
Once again, I would like to thank Roger, Wendy, and Kayla. Thank you for taking part of this conversation and giving us your feedback. Secretary, so now we're going to go to a panel of experts in the area of housing and homelessness. You want to help me welcome them?
That'd be terrific.
All right. So we're going to start, we're going to have Karen Santilli, who is the president and CEO of Crossroads, Rhode Island. Eileen Hayes, who is the president and CEO of Amos House. Captain Erik Wallin, executive director of Operation Stand Down. And Kristina Contreras Fox, who is the senior policy analyst for the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. I want to thank each one of you for being part of this conversation today. And I would like to invite each one of you to introduce yourself to the audience. Right now, we have about 112 individuals connected to the meeting, plus the ones that are watching on Facebook. And we're going to start with Karen. Right?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored to be included in this important conversation. I'd like to start by thanking you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor, for this event and for allowing us to continue the conversation about housing and homelessness in Rhode Island. Crossroads is excited to continue working with the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Pryor, and all those in the administration to help us invest in the best practices and solutions that we know will end homelessness for Rhode Islanders. Sorry, this fire truck's going by my office. I want to acknowledge Roger and Wendy and Kayla for sharing their life experiences. It's critical that we hear, see, and include you in this process. So thank you for being a part of this today. Rep. Speakman and Senator Kallman, thank you for your efforts, and all of your colleagues in the House and Senate for moving all that important legislation forward. The mission of Crossroads Rhode Island is to help homeless or at-risk individuals and families secure stable homes. Those we serve achieve this by engaging in our range of services, including housing, basic needs, shelter, case management, referrals, and education and employment services. Our model of delivering those services is Housing First. Housing First is a philosophy and a model that is used by communities around the country who are successfully ending homelessness and achieving functional zero, as Lieutenant Governor mentioned earlier. On average, Crossroads helps and provides supportive services and housing for about 4,000 people each year across the entire state of Rhode Island. We meet people where they are, and if we can keep folks out of shelter by helping them problem solve and offer one-time assistance, we will do that. If they need shelter, we offer shelter and work really hard to get them out and get them housed as quickly as possible. Once housed, we continue providing the supportive services that they need as long as they want it. And about 90% of those that we house will remain in their own homes and never become homeless again. In addition to these services, and many folks don't know this, Crossroads is also a housing developer. We actually develop housing that is exclusively for households who have experienced homelessness and are at the lowest levels of income in our society. We currently own 370 units of permanent supportive housing across Rhode Island in North Kingstown, West Warwick, and Providence. And we have plans to develop hundreds more. Exciting new development projects are in the works now. So thank you for having me along with these other great panelists, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we'd like to hear an introduction from Eileen Hayes. Eileen?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor and our reps and Senate leaders, and most important, our people who have experienced homelessness. I'm really excited that Roger was able to move into one of our rooming houses yesterday. But there's a challenge with that because it is a rooming house with 7 other men, and because he's now there, he loses his number on the wait list for his own unit. So that's part of the issues that we have with a lot of the systems that we work with. Amos House is dedicated to providing housing and training and supports for folks that are homeless. But we do it a little bit differently than Crossroads, which I think is really terrific because we now have a continuum of services that meet people where they're at as well. So if you're looking for recovery housing because you struggle with a substance use disorder, you're going to find that at Amos House. So we start with a 90-day treatment program for men and women who are homeless, and from there they move into either a recovery house or a specialized house. We have a fatherhood house for men that are raising children, and a mother-child reunification program for women who may have had their children removed because of their homelessness or addiction or incarceration. And the goal is to help them learn how to be good parents while addressing their recovery issues. We have housing much smaller than Crossroads. We own about 15 properties, and we also do our own housing development. But everybody who comes through our program starts with a bed, but more importantly, receives services from our financial opportunity centers. So they receive a financial coaching to get their lives back on track, to resolve debt, to pay off fines, to get licenses reinstated, all the things that allow people to get on their feet. They also work with an employment coach to help them learn how to either get a trade in one of our training programs or a direct placement in employment. And the goal is really to have people complete with a job, with a place to live, and with strong recovery as they move into either a rooming house with other people that are also in recovery, or an apartment where they'll continue to also have supports. So the important, as everybody said, is the need for options that meet people based on what their situation is. And it's really important to recognize that, as Kristina will show in the numbers, that there's actually a very small percentage of folks that are homeless, that are chronically homeless. And those folks really need a housing first model that addresses their need for supportive services. And many other people need access to a unit that is affordable, with rental assistance to help them with the beginning rental security deposits and first month's rent. Even if folks have a Section 8 voucher, they still have to pay the full price for the first month's rent. So people often need rental assistance. So we also provide that. The thing that we've done in the past year that has been challenging has been, we've been operating a hotel for folks that are homeless and need to have more space, because, as everybody knows, we've reduced shelter capacity due to COVID, and many people who were really vulnerable medically needed a place to go where they would have social distancing. So this summer we were working with 110 folks in one hotel, and now we've moved into the Wyndham Hotel, and we've also taken over the 10 beds for folks that are that may be COVID positive and need quarantine for the 2 weeks that they need to be there. But when they leave, we don't know where they're going to go, because we're also managing a statewide landlord incentive program. Last year, the governor operated a rentalist landlord challenge where a landlord could get paid $2,000 for a unit. We've been doing that right now, trying to do the same thing. And we have very few landlords that are able to come up with units that are affordable for the folks that we work with. And that's the other issue in terms of, there's just not issues around accessibility, there's also affordability. And I think we don't necessarily think about affordability for folks that are living on an SSI check the same as we do for somebody that's working full time and may have to work 2 jobs, but they have the capacity to do that. So the idea of the need for supportive housing is by far one of the biggest challenges that we have as a state. The other major challenge that Amos House sees every day is that we work with folks that are coming from the prisons, and 90% of the folks that live with us have criminal backgrounds, and they are consistently being denied units because of their background, their BCIs. And even when they are in recovery, even when they've been able to continue to stay out of prison, that felony that they might have follows them for very many years. And so we also need reentry housing that helps people with the challenges of reentry and also helps them clean up the wreckage of their past so that they really have an opportunity to move forward. We know that recidivism is drastically reduced when people have a job and a home and a sense of purpose in their lives. And Amos House tries really hard to provide all those things in a community setting so that people don't have to feel alone. So I'm going to stop there so that we can move over to the next speaker. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen. So next, we're going to go with Captain Erik Wallin. Captain Wallin. I think you're muted. Couldn't hear you. Let's see.
Still muted
hear
for
you.
now.
No, so I'm gonna go to Kristina, come back to you, Captain. So let's go to Kristina Contreras Fox. Hi, Kristina.
Hello, good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone.
Buenas tardes.
So, my name is Kristina Contreras Fox. I am the Senior Policy Analyst at the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. My pronouns are she, her, ella. So the Coalition to End Homelessness, we recently changed our name before the summer. We were known as the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homeless, the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. We were founded in 1988, and the coalition works collaboratively with our partners to realize and advance lasting solutions to prevent and end homelessness in Rhode Island. We envision a state where no Rhode Islander experiences homelessness, and to, excuse me, one second. Sorry about that. Thank you all. So as I was saying, we work collaboratively with our coalition members and community partners to create and advance lasting solutions that end and prevent homelessness here in Rhode Island. And to realize this, we envision a state where no Rhode Islander experiences homelessness. And to realize this, we focus on 4 main areas of work: constituent engagement, which includes the Voices of Homelessness Speakers Bureau, which is a team of Rhode Islanders who have lived expertise on housing and homelessness, and they share their stories and their perspective to educate folks on what homelessness is, what it's like to go through, what it's like to try to find housing when you're in this. Kayla Sims and Wendy Thomas, who both spoke so powerfully today, are both members of this incredible group that educates and advocates for ending and preventing homelessness. We also work on systems transformation, training, education, and policy and advocacy. And policy is key because we know that getting to virtual zero is impossible without broad systemic change, which can only happen at the policy level. Read, we need ending homelessness to be a priority of our state government at all levels. And so thank you very, very much to Lieutenant Governor Matos for convening this incredibly important conversation, and to all of the folks who have been a part of this. This is the first of many that we need to have. So housing is an issue. Housing is the issue, and it's a basic need for all of us. I'm sorry. Would you like me? So I'm about to go into my presentation, but I think there was one other person who was going to introduce themselves. Should I pause for that, or should I continue?
Kristina, let me check to see if Captain Wallin is available, and then we go into the presentation.
Hi, Lieutenant Governor, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Good. So I'm the Executive Director of Operation Stand Down, which is the state's largest and leading veteran-focused nonprofit. We exclusively serve the veteran community in Rhode Island, providing services to just over 2,000 veterans every year. And Operation Stand Down was founded by a local Rhode Islander, Tony DeQuattro, 30 years ago, at a time when, quite frankly, the resources were just not there, both federal or state resources. That clearly has changed, but the way that we've approached dealing with veteran homelessness has also changed. Clearly, the first focus is housing. And for many years, it was HUD-funded permanent supportive housing. As we developed, I've been here for now 11 years. And as I came to this organization, I discovered that some of the limitations on that housing, federal definition of chronic homelessness, which requires that someone be homeless for over a year or more, or that they have repeated systematic periods of homelessness, really prevents our ability in stopping kind of the ravages of homelessness. So we moved away from that model. We own and have developed and operate 88 units. It's a combination of both permanent housing, transitional housing, and sober living housing. We've combined those services with both federal and state-funded employment and training programs through Real Pathways, through the state, through the Department of Labor's programs for veterans, and a legal services program. And our focus has always been, in addition to providing actual housing, to help those veterans who become homeless to either prevent it by providing and paying back rent to keep them in the housing they're in, or to provide that security deposit and up to 6, and in some cases 12 months of rent while we get them employed. And that can be a process. I think we all recognize a lot of times homelessness or the things that lead people to insecurity in housing can result in barriers to employment. No driver's license, loss of driver's licenses, causing an inability to get back and forth to work, to get to medical appointments, to deal with legal issues. We also see that having an impact on the ability to access the kinds of services that other agencies have. So by combining legal programs, legal assistance, attorney-assisted applications for VA disability benefits and Social Security disability benefits, we work to combine both employment benefits to lead to long-term financial security and housing stability. And that has been a model that's been, I think, very successful in the veteran community. But clearly, the shortage in housing and the availability we see now, the money is in the state for veterans. The availability of housing is not.
Thank you, Captain Wallin, for that information. Next, we're going to go to Kristina. Kristina is going to give us some important data.
It is everything. And because all of us are impacted by housing, because we all need housing, all of us are impacted by homelessness, not only those who are experiencing it, because it truly can happen to anyone. It can. What we need to do is have a state, have a system, have a community where when somebody falls on those difficult times, they don't fall down and stay there. But that's where we are right now. Getting to that stability can be the struggle of a lifetime. And listen, we didn't get here overnight. The pandemic has been an enormous exacerbator for the worse, obviously. But this moment, even before the pandemic hit, we were in a crisis with our housing. And we didn't arrive here overnight. We got to this moment as a result of decades of inaction and poor, most often explicitly racist housing policy. And so now, after all of those years, that struggle is the norm in Rhode Island. Excuse me. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you more information about the current scope of homelessness, the persistent root causes, and the pandemic's impact. And so I want folks, think of this as the groundwork, not just for this conversation here, but for the larger conversation, ongoing conversation about how we end and prevent homelessness in Rhode Island. So next slide, please. So first, point in time count. Very quickly, what is the point in time count? This is how we're able to put our finger on the pulse of how many people are experiencing homelessness in Rhode Island. Taking a true census is very, very difficult, as we all know from, saving our 2 congressional seats through the 2020 census. But doing that with a community of people, many of whom are not wanting to be found, especially our youth, or who are always on the move because they have to be, it's very difficult to get an exact count. But the point in time is a way for us to understand and get an idea of what the scope of it is. So what this is every January, HUD tells us that we need to do a count of all people, sheltered and unsheltered, who are experiencing homelessness in Rhode Island on any given night in January. So from that count, we have this data. So we know that on any given night, there are 1,267 Rhode Islanders who are experiencing homelessness. 181 of those on any given night are sleeping outdoors in cars or in places unfit for human habitation. But there's another note that I want to list on here. Chronic. So as you can see, homelessness is on the rise in Rhode Island. And one data point that's not listed here is the rate of chronic homelessness. So we have seen from last year to this year, we've seen about a 14-15% in homelessness, increase in homelessness overall. In that same year, we saw a nearly 60% increase in chronic homelessness, meaning people who are experiencing homelessness a year or longer, and they have a disabling condition, such as a physical disability, a mental health challenge, or a substance use issue. So we know that these numbers are increasing, and we know why these numbers are increasing. Next slide, please. So the Coalition to End Homelessness oversees the Rhode Island Coordinated Entry System. So very quickly, coordinated entry is a HUD-approved procedure to connect people in need with emergency shelter and housing supports. This is a policy that's dictated to us by the federal government, how we need to structure this and implement it, et cetera. So if somebody is experiencing homelessness or they're facing homelessness, so say they're about to be evicted, or they have been told like by a partner, like you need to leave, you need to get out, right? If somebody is in that situation, you or someone you know is in that situation, they should call the coordinated entry system. That number is here, it's open. This is a hotline that's open 365 days a year. You call 401-277-4316. But as you can see, people are in great need in our state. In February of this year, in 1 week, there was over 1,600 people who called, 1,600 calls in a week to our system. Now we're seeing about 1,000 calls a week into our system. The shelter system is not a strong net. It is a broken Band-Aid because the need is just so unbelievably overwhelming. Please believe me when I tell you, there is no trimming of salaries. There is no rejiggering of infrastructure that will get at the root cause of homelessness, persistent homelessness in Rhode Island, because we need more housing built and we need more resources into our state to help people afford their home and just have stability overall. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Because who's experiencing homelessness in Rhode Island? So as you can see here, most of this slide focuses on income. I'm not going to dive too much into this, but I use this to further illustrate my point of why we need more housing, especially more housing for people who have no income, extremely low income, low and moderate income. We need more housing and we need more help with housing affordability. Because yes, when folks are coming to the shelter system, one, it's usually because they have exhausted everything that they have before they can come to us. And when you look at what people are, what you look at the income levels people have contrasted with what it costs to just rent an apartment here in Rhode Island, I mean, nearly half of all adults entering shelter have no income. And nearly all of them make between 0 and 12,000 a year. You need to be making at least $22.54 an hour in order to be able to rent a 2-bedroom in Rhode Island without being cost burdened. The average rental price in Providence now is $1,900 a month. I mean, we are setting people up for failure. We're telling people, pull yourself up, work hard, and you can make that happen, right? It's the American dream. Work hard, never give up. You'll have enough to meet your needs. Work hard, you'll have a home. You'll have a safe place for your kids. Your kids will do better than you. That's not the case anymore. And we need to change that. Excuse me. So next slide, please. So the other piece that I really want to highlight here is who's experiencing homelessness, because we are not, if we are not actively anti-racist in our work to end homelessness, if we're not centering ending and preventing homelessness in racial equity and justice, we are not ending anything. Systemic racism is a root cause of homelessness and has been in this country since day one and has been explicitly within our housing policy for decades. I think of things like redlining or banks not allowed, like when banks would not give mortgages to, or give credit for mortgages to Black and Indigenous people of color looking to buy in white neighborhoods, right? All of these things come through and you see it in the data. I mean, so just looking at Black Rhode Islanders, who comprise about a little less than 7% of our population here, but are nearly 27% of all people in emergency shelter, over 40% of people in transitional housing, and over half Black Rhode Islanders experiencing homelessness are outside. You look at white Rhode Islanders, who are 80% of the population, over half of them are emergency shelter, over 40% in transitional, over 40% outdoors. If we could go to the next slide, please. And if you, this is, I mean, race and ethnicity, there's a very strong argument that those two are one and the same, right? It's not white people who are experiencing this marginalization, who are being shut out from accessing basic needs like housing. And when you look at the Latinx population here in Rhode Island, this is a really strong example. So eviction is also a root cause of homelessness in our state. We have the highest eviction rate in the entire region. Our eviction rate is actually higher than the national average. And this is a root cause of homelessness. And this, I'm going to give this example so people can see how all of these pieces fit together, right? The intersectionality of it all. Latinx Rhode Islanders, 75% of us are, because I'm Latina, 75% of us are renters. 25% of us own our home, but the vast majority of Latinx households rent. The vast majority of Latinx households are also folks who have lost the most income and the most jobs during the pandemic, because the industries that have high levels of have a high Latino workforce, like hospitality, travel, tourism, restaurants, etc. Those industries all got hit really hard in the pandemic. People have lost income. Yes, there have been some protections against eviction, but only for non-payment of rent. And those have been very weak and inconsistent. So you have the vast majority of people in the community who are vulnerable to eviction, who are constantly being evicted. Like I said, we have the highest eviction rate in the region. And once you're evicted, getting housing again is virtually impossible, because landlords they look you up in the judiciary database on the Rhode Island Judiciary website, because it's publicly available. They look, see your name's there, see that a case has been filed, not the decision, right? Not if it got dismissed or if it got mediated through emergency rental assistance. They just see that the case was filed, and that's enough for them to be like, nope, I'm done. Not doing this. I don't want to get involved. Somebody who has an eviction on their record is not a solid tenant. And that traps people in homelessness every single day, because every time you try to come back from that, it's okay, well, now I'm just looking for a place where I can afford it, because the gap between wages and the cost of housing is astronomical. I just need to, you have people who are now just thinking, I just need a roof over my head and my kids' heads. I just need somebody who will take me and I can afford the monthly rent, right? And while there are many, many landlords who will not rent to somebody with an eviction on their record, there are certainly ones that will. There is a market for that. And a lot of that housing stock is in deplorable conditions. So people are trapped in this cycle of losing a home, getting evicted, trying to find a new one, going from dilapidated home to dilapidated home until finally they can't do it anymore. And they're calling coordinated entry, trying to get into a shelter. And the people whom that is happening to the most are the people who it's been happening to historically, and that is Black and Indigenous Rhode Islanders of color. So increasing the supply of safe, healthy, affordable homes, increasing resources to help people afford rent, increasing wages and income here in our state, all of this is the most powerfully anti-racist action that we can take. And it's essential that we do this. So next slide, please. Because as I was saying, housing is intersectional, and the costs have huge ripple effects into so many other places in our state and in our system. So as I said, housing is healthcare. And when you don't have housing, your healthcare becomes incredibly expensive, incredibly expensive. There's one data point I want to share with everyone. So as it says on this slide, the average healthcare cost per person annually is $10,000 a year. For the top 25 highest utilizers of Medicaid in Rhode Island, many of whom, if not all, are currently experiencing chronic homelessness. That annual cost is $225,000 per person annually. Because if you have healthcare, if you have a SNAP card, right? And I'm speaking from my personal experience. I've been on SNAP, I've been a Medicaid patient, and neither of those things helped me when my landlord called and said, hey, if I don't get your rent, if I don't get you and your boyfriend's rent this month, I'm gonna have to evict you, right? Not knowing where you're going to sleep at night, not knowing that you have a safe place to go, right? That's a bad thing all the way around. It hurts not just the person who's going through it, but it hurts all of us. I mean, the idea of all of us or none of us, or we're all in this together, is so incredibly true, especially when it comes to basic needs. But it's not only just healthcare. So next slide, please. So we've spoken a little bit today about Pay for Success, which is a very, very exciting project. It's the state's first social impact bond. What it will do is target 125 vouchers for permanent supportive housing, which is the permanent housing plus wraparound services and supports for 125 Rhode Islanders experiencing chronic homelessness who are also highest utilizers of emergency services, people who are in and out of the emergency room, in and out of shelter, but also who have a history of incarceration, because the intersection between homelessness and incarceration is a tightly wound braid. Over 4 of people who have been involved in the justice system, 32% of them are experiencing chronic homelessness. So when you work on housing, when you focus on housing and you focus on increasing the units and increasing affordability and removing barriers, we are doing not just good work to help people get housed, but we are doing good work on so many different levels that are so essentially needed in our state. Next slide, please. And this is really, I mean, if you don't listen to anything else I've said, listen to me here now. Why are we seeing this continue to increase? We've gotten millions from the federal government. We've had an incredible amount of policy change this past session, right? We've seen our first housing production fund, first Pay for Success project, banning discrimination based on source of income. Why are we still here? And you'll see a couple of similar themes, right? Number one, high cost of housing versus low wages, right? If you are not making enough money, you're not going to be able to afford your rent. And people are not making enough right now. Even and Rhode Island we are cheap compared to Boston and New York. This is still hands down the most expensive part of the country to live, right? The Boss-Wash corridor between here and Washington, D.C., between Boston and Washington, D.C. But even in Rhode Island, in order to be able to rent a 2-bedroom apartment without being cost burdened, you have to be making at over $22.50 an hour. That's over $66,000 a year. The average renter in Rhode Island makes about $34,000 a year. The average wage is $14.24 an hour. You can be working full time. Like, yes, jobs are important, but we increased the minimum wage this year, which is a huge, important first step, right? But wages are not keeping up with the cost of housing, and people are working. I mean, if you look at extremely low income households, over 40% of those households have at least one adult who's working full time. But if what you bring home is still not enough to meet your bills, you can't come back, you can't catch up from that by your own. And of course, thousands have lost their jobs, have had their hours reduced because of the pandemic. Some people have been able to come back because, we're starting to reopen again, but hundreds of people will never see their jobs come back, right? So we need to do something that addresses this. We need, if it costs money to get this basic need, and housing is a human right. We believe that firmly at the Coalition to End Homelessness. And I think that that's something that's shared comprehensively, right, across our state. Housing is a human right, but if you're going to make people pay to access a human right, you need to give them money. If it takes money, give people money, give them what they need, right? Another huge reason, and this is one of the biggest reasons, is our nearly total lack of affordable and available housing units. We don't have housing here in our state. If you are making 120% AMI, which AMI stands for area median income, essentially that just means where you are. Like I live in Smithfield. So what of all the people who live here in Smithfield, you add up all of our incomes, all of our wages, and you divide it by how many of us live here. That's what, you know, the median, that's like the middle ground of what people are making, right? So like the area median income here is different than say in Dubai or in San Francisco or in Upper West Side of Manhattan, right? But for the most part, if you're making 120% AMI or above, you are saddled with options. If you can afford like $4 or $5 grand a month in rent, wow, you have a lot to choose from. The average rental, the average 2-bedroom in Providence is now $1,900 a month. That's not what people can afford, right? We need to do something that addresses this. And one of the biggest reasons is our scarcity. So by producing more housing, by producing and by preserving, maintaining the housing that we have, because we have the 3rd oldest housing stock in the entire country, right? I mean, my house was built in 1820. We have some old plumbing here, right? But we also have a population that is about to be predominantly our elders. So how many historical homes with, I have to take 2 staircases just to go down to the laundry room, right? Is this a place where people can safely age, right? We need to be putting money into building, but also preserving and maintaining and remodeling, for lack of a better word, preparing these houses to meet the needs of our community, right? So we need to build more homes. We have a housing production fund now in our budget for the first time in Rhode Island's history. We're about to get millions, hundreds of millions of dollars flooding into the state through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. We got the bank account. We've opened the bank account. Let's fill it up, right? Let's make sure that we're putting in monies to build and maintain our housing stock, because that is essential. Because, and this is the last piece that I'll say on this in particular, we need comprehensive, bold, systemic changes, and it doesn't get more comprehensive, bold, and systemic than this right here. This is a way for us to be able to address our housing needs overall efficiently and effectively. Because yes, there are a little over 1 million of us here in Rhode Island. All of us need housing, but all of our housing needs are different. In order for our system to be able to help people uniquely, it needs to have enough resources of what everybody needs, and everybody needs housing. So let's get some more housing. Let's get some more funds for that. And then finally, and I will never stop talking about this, systemic racism exacerbated by the pandemics in our increased eviction rates, weak and inconsistent eviction and foreclosure protections. This has perpetuated homelessness. And if we do not change it, this inequality is going to continue to run rampant. We need our policy solutions to address these root causes right here. And again, the most effective and efficient way to do this is to fund housing production and preservation and fund resources that help people keep their housing, afford their housing, and find new housing, right? So next slide, please.
Kristina, I want to bring back this senator and the state rep, so they're part of this conversation. Just want to be aware that we have 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure that they're part of the conversation with us also. Continue.
Absolutely, I'm almost wrapped up with this. So, but thank you for the flag. So, excuse me. This is also not having enough housing, not having enough resources to help with affordability, or resources that can go, I mean, trying to stand all of this up in a year when we've never been in this kind of a situation, meaning a pandemic before, is challenging, right? But these are the things that we need to have in place. It's been a challenge to get them to be in place, and that has impacted the number of people who are sleeping unsheltered. So you will remember from the beginning of my presentation, I talked about how homelessness is on the rise. I talked about unsheltered homelessness, how we know that on any given night, there are 181 people who will be sleeping outside. But that number is really, right now, that number is more close to 500. And you could see here the number of people, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of folks. Maybe it's been higher, maybe it's been lower in some months, but it's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people because there's literally nowhere for them to go. There is nowhere for them to go where they can rent or buy a home, but also there's nowhere for them to go when it comes to the shelter system. So next slide, please. Because as I was saying, the need is so overwhelming that what we have right now is not equipped to help everybody who needs help. So I believe Eileen and Karen talked about some of the COVID protocols that were instituted to keep people safe, like social distancing, meaning that we lost shelter beds. We lost, as a result of COVID, close to 150 year-round shelter beds. So now we have a deficit of not only emergency housing, which you can see on average, it's 92.5 units that we're missing every single month for adults. And then next slide, please. It's 23 and a half units. So 27 units for adult, 24 units for families. This is what we're lacking, right? This is the gap. And to fill that gap, the solution is not more shelter, although yes, we need to make sure that people are safe and secure and housed that night. But shelter cannot be the focus, because otherwise we're going to end up where we are right now, where you have folks who have no ability to get housing, so they're living in shelters long term. In order for us to make up these gaps in resources, make up these gaps in income inequality, make up these truly brutal, poisonous gaps due to systemic racism, we need to increase the supply of safe, healthy, and affordable homes in our state. And using the incoming ARPA funds for that is, I would say, of the utmost importance, and perhaps the most important thing that our state should be doing and has to do with this between now and next year. So I have a few more slides on here to talk about like the COVID response, but I understand if we want to bring more folks back in. But Lieutenant Governor, would you like me to continue, or would you like this to be more conversational?
I just want to bring back the panel. We have a couple of questions that we want to pose. So I would like though to, if we can also have in queue, Ben can have in queue that the map that you had of the state with the information. I think it was the slide number 10, I believe. Just have it in queue because we may have to refer back to it. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to the Secretary to start us with the discussion. Secretary.
Thank you. Well, that was a terrific presentation. And I want to say, Kristina, the way in which you described the intersectionality of the issues is so on target. And I think we also need to talk about the intersectionality of the participants in the solution and how we can all work together to get there. So this panel that the Lieutenant Governor has brought together is ideal for that purpose. We've heard from multiple panelists in their self-introductions and in your presentation, Kristina, about all of these issues that come together to present the problem of homelessness, the economy itself, job availability, ex-offender reentry and the lack thereof. We've heard about discrimination in all of its forms and how it presents barriers that are profound. We've heard about the necessity of the production and preservation of affordable units. So there are units of housing that are accessible, especially for the lowest income residents among us. In that mix, I wanted to really ask this general question of the panel, and I think we should already start to consider this a speed round if we can, Lieutenant Governor. What do you think are the single most important issues that we as an intersectionality of players ought to work on? What do you think are the top one or two things that in the next legislative session, as we look at ARPA funding we need to lean into. Who would like to go first?
I'll throw something out there that Eileen put in the chat, and I completely agree with her. We all do different kinds of housing and program. Eileen talked about theirs, Captain Wallin talked about theirs. We need all these kinds of housing. They're all critical. They all play a role in helping us end homelessness. But if we can't get the funds that are available out to the organizations doing this work, we're not going to be able to do it. We're not going to be able to spend the funds in time. And so I feel like we've learned some of these lessons from the rental assistance program, the housing help RI and the rent relief programs. There's a lot of, and sometimes it's necessary. We're talking about taxpayers' dollars. Yes, we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, absolutely, and be accountable. But in many cases, there are there's red tape that gets in the way of us spending these funds. So whatever the administration, the legislation can do to help break down some of those barriers, we know what we need to do. We need the funds to do it. We're all private, nonprofit organizations. We are not organizations or departments of the state government.
A really good point about the fact that sometimes the parameters of these programs dictate what we are going to do more than the needs which ought to guide us. So it's a really good point, Karen. Other points pertaining to the one or two things that are most necessary now. We're blessed with the key representative, the key senator listening along with the lieutenant governor. What do we need to focus upon?
I mean, I really think that we need to look at expanding the eligibility for this assistance, especially the diversion assistance that's available. Certainly our hands are tied with federal funding, but to be able to keep someone in their residence before they become homeless or rapidly house them within a month or so is so key. And I think one of the panelists that was speaking who has been experienced homelessness basically touched on this, that she was just over that level of being eligible for help and ultimately had to get to that point where she fell under that level to get any assistance. And that's terribly tragic because we know that, as has been expressed by everybody, the cost of living is so high, but I don't think that that's really acknowledged in these income eligibility requirements.
And often these diversion programs can serve as solutions that prevent homelessness and help at the margins of these programs, help to round out available services and really provide direct relief. Extremely well said. Who else wants to name one thing or two? I'm going to, and with the lieutenant governor as a tag teamer, throw out a couple more topics to touch upon. Anyone? I think Eileen is aiming to talk, please.
I would make sure that we have short-term solutions about keeping people housed through the next year of pandemic, meaning more shelter beds, hotel rooms, ways to keep people from ending up on the street. Middle-term solutions by really getting some of the easiest money out the door the fastest, and then long-term solution with the real plan to develop affordable housing. And I'd also look at the folks that are on that list waiting to get into housing and really do a mapping of what kind of housing each one of those families and individuals qualify for or interested in, and make sure that we keep their thoughts and what they want for themselves and their families in line, and really target the housing development and the housing plan based on all of the different kinds of people that we're working with, and not focus just on one population of folks that are out there, because that actually creates, I think, a bigger barrier for anybody to get into housing if we don't do a better job of mapping where people should go and what kind of housing we should create.
Very well said. Start with the clients, what they need. Extremely well said. Other points, top of list?
As someone said in one of these panels, build, build, build.
And if I may,
Kristina?
Please,
Yeah.
Senator.
Oh.
Thank you. I did see a question come through the chat much earlier about how we ensure that a portion of what we build is allocated for people throughout the income spectrum, right? This is something that we can address from a policy level. This is something I'm interested in working on. It has been tried in different cities and towns. There's Boston, I think it's like 18% of new developments are dedicated to affordable housing. We need to be exploring projects like that on a state, or policies like that on a statewide level, so that when we are building housing, there is housing that can accommodate everyone in our community, whether you are in a market rate, top of the line, top of the price point apartment, or whether you are indeed restricted affordable housing. We need to have a solid plan to approach that. And I think Karen is totally right when she says build, 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 because more housing lessens the pinch on everybody. But we do need to be really, really focusing on the people who right now are not able to afford housing.
Lieutenant Governor is recognizing Kristina.
Kristina.
Thank you. So what I wanted to add is there's a lot of flexibility with incoming stimulus funds on how they can be spent, particularly when it comes to housing and homelessness. But I also encourage us as a state to take every flexibility that we can in the guidance when it comes to eligibility. So I know self-certification is something that's been very prominent in some of the guidances that have come out in the last round of stimulus funds, because meaning that, if you ask for documentation, so I want to see that you lost income due to COVID. I want you to give me your last 4 pay stubs. If the person doesn't have those last 4 pay stubs, or if they have lost their home because of a fire and you're asking them for their social security number, which burned up in the fire, right? Self-certification is a way for them to be able to move forward with the application. So making sure that this program eligibility that we are creating here in the state, it's as flexible and easy and stringless as possible for people who are applying, so that we can get this out the door as soon as possible. And then just more communication to people to let them know that this even exists. Not everybody's following the governor or the lieutenant governor's social media page, right? Not everybody's paying attention to the news. But people are always looking at their PO boxes or their mailboxes, right? Because they need to get posts, right? So can we make sure that we are doing everything that we possibly can to meet people where they're at, to even just tell them about what's actually happening?
Lieutenant Governor, we have the finest congressional delegation in the land.
We do.
One of the things that I think you're hearing, I wonder if you're reacting this way too, is there's a lot around flexibility and the fact that we need to tailor programs to our homeless community, to the needs of our individual clients. And sometimes the federal rules are rigid, not because of our congressional delegation, but because of larger scale lawmaking.
Yes, correct. And this is a topic that I have been bringing up already to them, their staff, how we can have more flexibility when it comes to the definition of homelessness. I think that would make a huge impact. So if all of us can advocate and work with the wonderful, because we are very fortunate in Rhode Island with the wonderful federal delegation that we have. If we can work with them and maybe with our networks in our other states, so we can help the lawmakers of other states also to understand the big challenge that it is, the federal definition of homelessness, in order to address the problem before it becomes a chronic issue, because that's what we're happening right now. If it's not a chronic issue, you cannot tap into the federal resources, and that's a big problem that we're having. And I see that Representative Speakman, you unmute yourself. You want to speak?
Yes, thank you. A couple of things with regard to legislation. I know folks don't like commissions, but there is a commission this summer. Some folks on the call actually are on that commission, as am I. It's a House study commission to look at the low mod legislation and to try to make it work better. It was supposed to bring municipalities up to 10%. That hasn't worked. So we're going to try to figure out a way to change that. And I've learned a lot from this call that will help with the conversations around that table, I think. And to Kristina's point about self-certification, I've had calls from a number of folks in my district who are trying to get the rent relief program. And they said just what you said, Kristina. It's so hard. I don't have all this paperwork. So that's something that can change right away. If Rhode Island Housing is listening, and I know they are, and they're sensitive to the needs of the folks who come to them for relief. I will also say that Rhode Island Housing has offered, I can't speak for senators, but has offered to representatives to do town halls with folks in our district to help them learn how to get on to get the rent relief program. Now, again, that requires either getting the local paper to learn about it or seeing it online. So you've got me thinking about how to get people to know that we're having these town halls. So I have seen more information lately about getting folks access to that $200 million for rent relief and utilities relief. Thank you.
I also suggest that we decentralize some of that money, because a lot of community organizations that have very close ties to people that are trying to get it can't access, and they're trying to help, but they don't have access to the funds. Just like last year with the CARES Act money, a very big part of that money went to the Rhode Island Foundation, and they were able to get that money much more quickly out the door to agencies that really needed it. If we did something like that with the rent relief money, I think maybe more people would have the supports to get those documents from their local community organizations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge someone that has been watching and giving us feedback. Governor McKee, thank you for watching and taking
Personally sending us messages all the way through.
So all the way through the conversation. So thank you for watching and paying attention to this conversation. There is so much that we have to do around the topic of housing, but around this topic of homelessness. And I'm so want to thank you, all of you, for participating in this conversation. I want to say Representative Speakman, Senator Kallman, thank you so much for taking the time and being part of this conversation. We have to do so much, but we're going to do it because right now there is a unified voice here in the state of Rhode Island. We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the governor's office, we have the whole leadership prioritizing housing. So I want to thank each one of you for your participation today. I don't want to go beyond the time that we promised we were going to be on. And I want to thank my co-host, Secretary Pryor. So I'm telling you, we're doing this and we're going to end up with a TV show, right?
Yes, ma'am. Tomorrow we have a 2030 session that the governor will kick off with yourself on workforce development, on job training and access to job opportunities. As we heard from Kristina and all the panelists, jobs are at the center of this too, in that intersectionality. So join us again tomorrow at 5:30.
That's right, tomorrow 5:30. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor, and all panelists.
Thank you so much for having us.